If you stand today in Brooklyn Bridge Park, looking across the East River, you are not just looking at a city. You are looking at a story. You are looking at a forest of ambition, a physical ledger of human ego, capital, disaster, and resilience, all written in stone, steel, and glass. The New York skyline is perhaps the city's greatest character. It's an entity, a living, breathing thing that is constantly shedding its skin, growing taller, denser, and more complex. To understand this skyline is to understand the soul of America. But this forest, this dense collection of spires, did not appear overnight. It wasn't born from a single vision. It was the result of 400 years of messy, chaotic, and often brutal evolution. Our story tonight is that evolution. We will journey from the mud and wood trading post of the 17th century to the pencil-thin glass towers of the 21st. This is the history of architecture in New York. Let's transport ourselves back to the 1620s. The island we call Manhattan is Mannahatta, a hilly, forested land inhabited by the Lenape people. When the Dutch West India Company arrives, they are not thinking of beauty. They are not thinking of legacy. They are thinking of commerce and defense. This is New Amsterdam, and its architecture is purely practical. Imagine a cluster of small wooden houses with steep, gabled roofs, huddled at the very southern tip of the island. They face the harbor, their backs to the wilderness of the north, which is now about Canal Street. The skyline is a wooden palisade, a crude wall built to keep out the British and the Native Americans. Its path is now a canyon of global finance, Wall Street. When the British take over in 1664 and rename the city New York, the architecture begins to reflect a new master. We see the rise of the Georgian style, imported directly from London. This is the style of order, symmetry, and proportion. It's about projecting stability and civilized British rule. Miraculously, one perfect example of this era survives. If you walk down Broadway today, dwarfed by the glass towers of the financial district, you will find St. Paul's Chapel. Completed in 1766, it is a small, elegant stone church. It's almost comical in its scale compared to its neighbors. But this building is a time capsule. George Washington prayed here after his inauguration. It survived the Great Fire of 1776, which destroyed a quarter of the city. It stood as a bastion of hope on September 11th. Its modest, classical spire was the first finger pointing to the sky, a humble ancestor of all that was to come. After the Revolution, America wanted its own identity. It adopted the federal style, a lighter, more refined version of Georgian, and looked to ancient Greece and Rome for inspiration. The new democracy needed a democratic architecture. This is when we get the graceful proportions of Gracie Mansion, 1999. And the elegant, refined City Hall, 1811, which was intentionally built with fine marble on its front and south side, but cheap brownstone on its back, as the builders assumed the city would never grow north of it. They could not have been more wrong. The single most important event in New York's architectural history is not a building, it's a map. In 1811, the city commissioners released the Commissioner's Plan. It was a ruthless, visionary, and utterly pragmatic act. It laid a perfect, rectangular grid of 12 avenues and 155 streets across the entire island, from Houston Street to 155th Street. This grid was a machine for real estate. It ignored the island's natural hills, valleys, and streams, forcing the land to conform to the map. It created thousands of identical rectangular plots, and in doing so, it set the stage for the next 200 years. It demanded density. It demanded verticality. As the city exploded north along this new grid, a new uniform emerged: the brownstone. From the 1840s to the 1890s, entire neighborhoods in Harlem, Brooklyn, and the Upper West Side were built of these Italianate and Second Empire row houses. They were named for the brown sandstone quarried in New Jersey and Connecticut, a material that was cheap and easy to carve into ornate details. But while the city's residential life was defined by the brownstone, a counter-movement was happening in its spiritual life. The Gothic revival looked back to the medieval cathedrals of Europe. In 1846, Richard Upjohn's Trinity Church was completed on Wall Street. With its dark, lace-like spire, it was the tallest building in the entire city for decades. It was a moral beacon, a finger of God, wagging at the money changers working in its shadow. Then, after the Civil War, came the Gilded Age. This was the era of the robber barons, the Vanderbilts, the Astors, the Carnegies. They had amassed fortunes that were unimaginable, and they wanted an architecture to match their ego. They didn't want simple brownstones. They wanted palaces. They turned to the Beaux-Arts style, named for the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. This was architecture as theater. It was opulent, dripping with ornamentation, marble, gold leaf, grand staircases, and massive columns. It was a direct import of European aristocracy, meant to show the world that these new money American industrialists were the new royalty. Most of the great Fifth Avenue Millionaires Row mansions are gone, torn down to make way for apartment buildings and department stores. But the public palaces of this era remain, and they are breathtaking. When you walk into the main concourse of Grand Central Terminal, 1913, you are in a Beaux-Arts cathedral. The soaring, vaulted ceiling painted with constellations, the grand staircases modeled on the Paris Opera. This was not just a place to catch a train. This was a gateway, a statement that you had arrived in the greatest city in the world. The same is true for the magnificent, lion-guarded New York Public Library, 1911. These were not just buildings. They were civic institutions built on a scale to rival the palaces of Europe, a gift to the public from the city's new industrial kings. While the Gilded Age was looking backward to Paris, a different revolution was brewing in Chicago and New York. It was a revolution driven by technology, not style. Two inventions, arriving at roughly the same time, changed everything. First, the steel frame. For all of history, the height of a building was limited by its walls. If you wanted to build high, the walls at the bottom had to be incredibly thick to support the weight. But the steel frame acts like a skeleton. The walls become a mere skin, hanging off the frame. The building's weight is carried by the steel, not the stone. Second, the safety elevator. People will not walk up more than 5 or 6 flights of stairs. In 1854, Elisha Otis famously demonstrated his safety brake at the Crystal Palace in New York, cutting the elevator's rope while standing on the platform. It caught, and the crowd cheered, a steel skeleton and a mechanical heart. These two inventions, combined with the tiny, expensive plots of land created by the 1811 grid, made the skyscraper not just possible, but inevitable. The first giants were still cloaked in old styles. The Woolworth Building, 1913, designed by Cass Gilbert, was the tallest building in the world when it opened. But it was a Gothic cathedral. Its nickname was the Cathedral of Commerce. It was a modern steel-frame building dressed in medieval clothes, a beautiful hybrid of the new and the old. The city was growing so tall, so fast, that it was creating a new problem: darkness. The new skyscrapers were casting permanent shadows, turning the streets below into dark, sunless canyons. So, in 1916, the city passed another transformative law, the 1916 Zoning Resolution. This law was simple. As a building got taller, it had to set back from the street, stepping inward as it rose. This was to allow light and air to reach the sidewalks. Architects didn't see this as a restriction. They saw it as a new design challenge. And in one of the happiest accidents in urban history, this law directly created the most iconic, most New York silhouette of all, the wedding cake ziggurat. This set the stage for the 1920s, the Jazz Age, the Roaring '20s, and the greatest architectural race in human history. The style of the day was Art Deco. Unlike the Beaux-Arts, Art Deco was not about Europe. It was about now. It was about speed, the machine, the automobile, the jazz rhythm. It was sleek, geometric, glamorous, and relentlessly optimistic. The race was on. In 1929, the Bank of Manhattan Tower at 40 Wall Street was planned to be the tallest in the world. But a rival architect, William Van Alen, was building a new headquarters for a car tycoon. Walter Chrysler. The Chrysler Building, 1930, is the ultimate hymn to Art Deco. It has decorative brickwork inspired by hubcaps, and its upper corners are adorned with giant, stainless steel eagles, copied from the hood ornaments of a Chrysler automobile. Van Alen knew about 40 Wall Street's height, so he had his crowning glory, a 185-foot vertex spire, secretly assembled inside the building's dome. One day, to the astonishment of the entire city, he hoisted it up through the roof in 90 minutes, claiming the title of world's tallest, and held the title for 11 months. Just down the street, an even more ambitious project was underway. The Empire State Building, 1931. Designed by Shreve Lamb and Harmon, this building was not just an icon. It was a miracle of logistics. It was built during the depths of the Great Depression. It was built in 1 year and 45 days. Think about that. Workers were assembling the steel frame at a pace of 4.5 stories a week. It was a symbol of pure, defiant American will. Its Art Deco style is more restrained than the Chrysler, more about mass, power, and elegant vertical lines. Its famous mooring mast, originally intended as a publicity stunt to dock Zeppelins, was what gave it the final height to become the undisputed champion. It would remain the tallest building in the world for nearly 40 years. This entire era of ambition was capped off by Rockefeller Center, 1930s. This wasn't just a skyscraper, it was a complex, a city within a city. A 22-acre campus of 14 Art Deco buildings perfectly integrated with art, public plazas, and an ice skating rink. It remains one of the greatest achievements of the 20th century urban planning. Then came World War II, and when the world emerged, the exuberant, decorative optimism of Art Deco felt frivolous. The world was more cynical, more sober. A new architectural philosophy, which had been brewing in Europe's Bauhaus school, now came to America. It was called the International Style. Its philosophy was driven by architects like Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, who famously said, "Less is more." This new architecture rejected all ornament. It believed a building should be an honest expression of its structure. It should be a machine for living, or in New York's case, a machine for working. The result was the glass box. In 1952, Lever House by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, SOM, stunned the city. It was a pristine blue-green glass tower that seemed to float above a public plaza. It was efficient, clean, and anonymous. This was perfected in 1958 by Mies van der Rohe himself with the Seagram building on Park Avenue. This is the masterpiece of the International Style. A dark, brooding bronze and glass tower. It is set back from the street by a grand empty plaza. It is perfectly proportioned, austere, and incredibly elegant. This became the new uniform. For the next 20 years, New York built hundreds of these glass boxes. They were cheap, efficient to build, and filled with office-friendly fluorescent light. This style reached its absolute monumental peak in 1973 with Minoru Yamasaki's World Trade Center. The Twin Towers were the largest, most minimal expressions of the style. Two colossal, shimmering boxes that were less about human scale and more about a monumental, geometric presence. By the 1970s, people were sick of it. The public found the International Style sterile, boring, and inhuman. The architect Robert Venturi shot back at Mies van der Rohe's "less is more" with a new motto: "Less is a bore." This was the birth of postmodernism. Postmodernism was playful. It brought back color. It brought back history, but often as a joke. It was theatrical, referential, and sometimes just plain weird. The building that announced this new era was Philip Johnson's AT&T building, now 550 Madison, in 1984. Philip Johnson, who had introduced the International Style to America with the Seagram building, now turned against his own creation. His AT&T building was a skyscraper made of pink granite with a grand Roman arch at its base, and on its top, a 30-foot-tall broken pediment, which looked exactly like the top of a Chippendale highboy dresser. It was a skyscraper with a furniture joke on top. The rebellion was complete. Ornament was back. As we moved toward the new millennium, The city's architecture became a chaotic mix of styles. Then, on September 11, 2001, the skyline was fundamentally, tragically, and permanently altered. The destruction of the World Trade Center left not just a physical hole in the skyline, but a psychic one. The debate over what to build in its place was the most emotionally fraught architectural conversation in history. The result is a campus of resilience. One World Trade Center, 2014, rises to a symbolic height of 1,776 feet, its glass form tapering to echo the Statue of Liberty. But perhaps more powerful is the memorial itself. Two giant square voids set in the footprints of the original towers, with water cascading endlessly into an abyss. It is architecture as absence, a profound space for memory. The 21st century has also seen the rise of the starchitect, global celebrity architects who are hired to create sculptural wow factor buildings. Frank Gehry gave us the shimmering, crumpled steel facade of the IAC building and the undulating stainless steel apartment tower at 8 Spruce Street. Bjarke Ingels gave us the court scraper via 57 West, a bizarre pyramid tetrahedron hybrid that merges a European courtyard with a Manhattan skyscraper. And this brings us to the final, current chapter, the one that is defining the skyline right now. If you look at the southern end of Central Park, you will see a new breed of building. They are not like the muscular Empire State or the wide-shouldered glass boxes. They are impossibly thin. They are known as the super talls, or the pencil towers of Billionaire's Row. Buildings like 432 Park Avenue, Central Park Tower, and the Steinway Tower, which is 24 times taller than it is wide, are not a product of architectural style. They are a product of new engineering, advanced dampers to stop them from swaying, and, more importantly, global finance. These are not offices. They are not for regular New Yorkers. They are, essentially, safe deposit boxes in the sky for a global elite, built to maximize the one priceless commodity New York will always sell: the view. They are a new kind of Gilded Age, reaching a new, dizzying height. The story of New York's architecture is, in the end, a story of reinvention. It's a story that starts with a Dutch wall built for trade. It's shaped by a pragmatic grid. It finds its soul in the competition between a Gothic church and a Beaux-Arts terminal. It races to the sky in a fit of Art Deco optimism, only to be sobered by the glass boxes of the modern age. It breaks its own rules, mourns its losses, and then builds again, higher and thinner than ever before. The skyline is a forest, and like any living forest, it is always changing. Old trees fall to make way for new saplings that strain to reach the light. It is never finished. It is never perfect. It is simply the most compelling, most complex, and most human story ever told in steel and stone. Thank you.